Hawaii Five-0 was designed so that Steve McGarrett didn't have to explain himself. In the late 1960s, no one in television was supposed to do this. If you set a show in New York, you filmed it in Hollywood. If you set it overseas, you faked it on a backlot. Shooting a network drama 2,500 miles from Los Angeles, entirely on location, wasn't ambitious, it was considered reckless. And yet, one producer insisted that if a show was going to be set in Hawaii, it had to be filmed only in Hawaii. That decision nearly killed the project before it ever aired, but it also created one of the most iconic television series of all time. This is how Hawaii Five-0 gambled everything on realism, and why there was no safe way back if it failed. The shortcuts were so entrenched they barely registered anymore. Hollywood had perfected the illusion until Hawaii made the illusion impossible. Leonard Freeman believed that era was ending. Freeman was a prolific television writer and producer with decades of experience and hundreds of teleplays to his credit. But the idea that eventually became Five-0 did not begin as a carefully planned franchise. The premise emerged from a personal suggestion. Freeman's mother-in-law lived in Hawaii and encouraged him to create a project that would bring him and his family to the islands more often. Leonard took the suggestion seriously and began thinking in practical terms. A police series made sense. Hawaii had already been used as a television setting before, most notably in Hawaiian Eye during the early 1960s. But Freeman viewed that earlier series shot in black and white as a missed opportunity. It was set in Hawaii, but it was not of Hawaii. It had also been filmed largely in Hollywood. Freeman's core belief was simple. If a series was going to be set in Hawaii, it had to be filmed entirely in Hawaii. That conviction shaped the pitch. The original concept centered on a lawman named Steve McGarrett under the working title of The Man, with Richard Boone as the lead. CBS rejected Boone for the role, forcing Freeman to retool both the concept and the casting. Out of that rejection came Hawaii Five-0, a title suggested by Freeman's mother-in-law that emphasized the state's recent admission to the Union and gave the series a sense of contemporary relevance. Selling the revised concept still involved enormous risk, as producing a network television series across the ocean from Los Angeles raised immediate concerns inside the industry. Filming in Hawaii meant shipping cast, crew, cameras, lighting equipment, sound gear, and film stock across the Pacific. Housing and transportation for dozens of people had to be arranged. Even processing and reviewing daily footage became more complicated. Network executives were well aware of those risks, but what ultimately made the project viable was Freeman's insistence that authenticity itself was a selling point. Hawaii was not just scenery, it was the hook. Crime stories, Freeman argued, would feel more immediate and more unsettling when they unfolded in a place associated with beauty, tourism, and calm. CBS agreed to proceed. If the show failed, there would be no easy way to fix it, and reversing course would be costly, disruptive, and public. Production on the pilot began in November 1967 on the island of Oahu. The shoot used real locations rather than constructed sets, emphasizing government buildings, urban streets, coastal areas, and landmarks that had rarely appeared in American television dramas. Before CBS ever showed Hawaii Five-0 to the public, the pilot was quietly tested in New York, where random viewers reacted to everything from the pacing to the cast. Feedback that directly led to recasting Dan Williams. Only after surviving that process did the pilot receive something unheard of at the time: a theatrical premiere in Honolulu, where CBS formally announced the show's fall pickup. Reviews noted the scale of the production and Jack Lord's performance as McGarrett. The pilot was expensive by television standards, but CBS was willing to absorb that cost if the series could find an audience. What the pilot did not guarantee was survival. Once Hawaii Five-0 entered the CBS schedule, the risks Leonard Freeman had accepted during development became immediate realities. What made the gamble survivable was execution.
They went out to all shops and restaurants on Friday.
Yeah, they were supposed to.
Get Frank Kakawa. Call him at home. Now, wait a minute. Make that the Alawai Golf Course. No, don't call him.
Freeman didn't just move a production to Hawaii, he rebuilt a working studio there from scratch. By the end of the first season, more than 20 episodes had been completed on location. Not a single day of production had been lost. For Freeman, the experiment was settled. The series debuted in the fall of 1968 in a Thursday 8 p.m. time slot, opposite strong competition on both ABC and NBC. The show's tone was serious and procedural, with stories centered on murder, organized crime, and political corruption. Even mothers who were interested in Hawaii Five-0 often opted for more age-appropriate programming rather than expose young children to the show's violence. The situation was made worse by inconsistent scheduling. Hawaii Five-0 suffered repeated preemptions during its first season. Episodes were frequently displaced by sports broadcasts, specials, and local programming decisions. In some markets, viewers could not reliably tell when the show would air from week to week. Without a stable slot, even a well-received show could fail. Then CBS made a decisive adjustment. On Christmas Day, 1968, the network moved Hawaii Five-0 to Wednesday at 10 p.m. The change placed the series in a position more compatible with its subject matter and reduced direct competition from lighter fare. After the shift, the series began to perform more consistently. Viewership increased, and the show stabilized enough for CBS to treat it as a dependable part of the schedule rather than a weekly question mark. As Season 1 ended, CBS briefly considered yanking the production back to Hollywood to reduce costs, but ultimately decided to keep the production in Hawaii. For the musical signature of the series, Freeman wanted something that would reflect modern Hawaii. He felt a great one-minute theme to any television series was invaluable. Composer Morton Stevens delivered an iconic show intro that received plenty of play on local and mainland radio stations. In the spring of 1969, The Ventures reached number 4 on the pop charts with their single of the theme, solidifying its place as one of the great musical television intros ever produced. State and local law enforcement agencies cooperated closely with production, providing access and guidance that simplified logistics and reduced friction during filming. As the show stabilized, its structure became more consistent. Episodes followed a recognizable pattern. A crime disrupted order, an investigation unfolded through interviews and legwork. For CBS, this consistency was instrumental. Hawaii Five-0's identity became inseparable from the people who appeared on screen each week. More than any single story or setting, the cast defined what the series was and what it was not. At the center was Jack Lord.
Our court order for surveillance runs out in exactly 2 weeks. Now, we better get some kind of lead soon.
Lord was not a conventional television star. His screen presence was severe, controlled, and imposing. As Steve McGarrett, he projected certainty rather than charm. He spoke deliberately, moved with purpose, and rarely displayed doubt. Critics often described him as stiff or intense, while supporters saw him as disciplined and commanding. McGarrett was not portrayed as a detective who solved crimes through intuition or eccentric brilliance. He was a professional administrator of justice, directing investigations, questioning suspects, and enforcing outcomes. The character fit the era's appetite for order and authority, particularly at a time when American society felt increasingly unstable. Lord's popularity in Hawaii was immense. He became one of the most recognizable public figures in the state during the show's run. In 1971, a poll was taken on Oahu, and Jack Lord finished second only to the governor of Hawaii in popularity. Children recognized him in public. Adults treated him with a mixture of admiration and awe. The line between actor and character often blurred. James MacArthur played Danny Williams, McGarrett's second in command. Where Lord was rigid and unsmiling, MacArthur brought warmth and accessibility. His character asked questions, voiced objections, and expressed frustration, but always within limits. Danny served as the audience's proxy, reacting to McGarrett's decisions without ever undermining them.
Steve, we're getting a lot of static on young Buchanan.
Static is a way of life around here, Doc.
It's coming from his family. They're riding their congressman, and he's on us. Okay.
Supporting cast members reinforced the show's emphasis on realism. Cam Fong, who portrayed Chin Ho Kelly, brought real-world experience as a Honolulu police officer. Fong got the part without having to even read for it. The minute Leonard Freeman saw Fong, who had actually come in to audition for the part of Wofat, he knew he had found his Chin Ho. His background lent authenticity to the show's procedures and interactions. Zulu, cast as Kono Kalakahua, was already well known as a disc jockey for a local radio station and nightclub entertainer. He won the role of Kono after going to a cattle call for the pilot movie. His presence helped ground the series in Hawaii itself, rather than presenting the islands as an abstract backdrop. Together, the cast created a sense of institutional continuity. Characters did not dominate episodes with personal drama. They performed roles within a clearly defined structure. Investigations moved forward through teamwork, brief exchanges, and methodical progress. As the years passed, cast changes occurred, but the overall approach remained consistent. New characters were introduced to replace departing ones, often with minimal narrative disruption. And for a long time, this formula worked. The cast had created a recognizable world, disciplined, professional, and dependable. That identity allowed Hawaii Five-0 to endure even as other series rose and fell around it. But the same stability that sustained the show also narrowed the range of stories it could tell. As television began to change, the limits of that identity would become more visible. As Hawaii Five-0 moved deeper into the 1970s, it became one of CBS's most durable properties. It has secured a stable place on the schedule and developed a loyal audience that returned week after week. That visibility brought scrutiny. The more visible the show became, the more exposed it was to national debates that had nothing to do with entertainment. For Hawaii itself, the show's success created tension between international exposure and local unease about being associated with televised crime. Crime dramas had always attracted criticism, but Hawaii Five-0 became a frequent target in national debates over television violence. Critics and activism groups increasingly linked violent television programming to real-world behavior. Hawaii Five-0 was cited alongside other police dramas as evidence that network television was normalizing brutality. These criticisms were amplified by broader cultural anxiety during the era, including rising crime rates and social unrest. One case in particular drew national attention. During a high-profile criminal trial, defense attorneys attempted to argue that exposure to violent television programs, including Hawaii Five-0, had influenced the defendant's actions. The argument did not succeed in court, but it placed the show squarely in the center of a public controversy. Still, Hawaii Five-0 endured. The show continued to deliver what it always had. Whether that would be enough to sustain it indefinitely was another matter. By the late 1970s, Hawaii Five-0 had entered a phase familiar to long-running network series. The show was no longer expanding its audience, it was maintaining it. After more than a decade on the air, the formula that had once been a strength had become increasingly rigid. Episodes continued to follow the same investigative structure. Behind the scenes, the strain of longevity was becoming harder to ignore. James MacArthur's departure at the end of season 11 removed one of the show's most recognizable and popular supporting figures. His role as Danny Williams had provided balance and familiarity, and replacing that presence proved difficult. New characters were introduced, but they were integrated cautiously and within the same narrow framework that had always defined the show. At the same time, network television was changing. Police dramas were beginning to shift toward more character-driven storytelling. Newer shows emphasized flawed protagonists, emotional consequences, and ongoing personal arcs. Compared to those programs, Hawaii Five-0 appeared increasingly formal and old-fashioned. During the final season, Five-0 repeated itself often, a sign the show was tired and had simply reached the limits of what it could do.
What's an Israeli agent doing with that?
Yeah, good question, Gimo. Good question.
Harry, I'm going to sign for these.
The network recognized that the series had delivered exactly what it was designed for, and that extending it further would not change its fundamental nature. The final episode aired in the spring of 1980. There was no dramatic reinvention, no radical departure from the established formula. The series ended as it had lived, with McGarrett in control, the system intact, and order restored. The show did not attempt to redefine itself at the end, because it had never been built to do so. That structural consistency limited the show creatively, but made it enormously valuable in syndication. But the show's legacy extended beyond reruns. The infrastructure built to support Hawaii Five-0 helped establish Hawaii as a viable production center for future television series like Magnum P.I. and Jake and the Fat Man. Later shows would benefit from the relationships, experience, and facilities created during its 12-year run. Hawaii Five-0 did not transform television storytelling. It did not chase trends or redefine the genre. Instead, it became something else, a durable institution. For more than a decade, it delivered the same promise every week: authority, procedure, and resolution. And it did so reliably enough to become one of the longest-running police dramas in television history. What Hawaii Five-0 offered was not surprise, but certainty. That consistency was both its limitation and its achievement.